Welcome to Mental Health Monday. It's a blessing to be with you, Dr. Whyte. Welcome. Always good to see you.
Thank you so much, sister.
Yes, see you each and every week. A program. I'm sure many of you either got the text or saw on social media that we are talking about marriage and relationships. And yes, we're even going to say a quick little something about Will Smith and Jada Pinkett, which I'm sure many of you have heard what has been discussed this last week about their marriage. And so we're going to springboard from their announcement and talk about marriage and give you hopefully some tips that can help you to know what can help your marriage and help it to work. So we are taking your questions on marriage and relationships tonight. So definitely put that in the chat. But before that, please let us know where you are watching from so we can say a very special welcome to you.
Always want to shout out my homie Clint.
Clint is there and accounted for. He is always going to be one of the first few. So welcome, Clint. We have Narissa from Texas. Welcome, Narissa.
We got Annette from Castle Rock, Washington. Awesome.
Welcome, Annette.
We got Celeste from South Korea. Hey, Celeste.
Hey, Celeste. I think you're our first South Korea, like even during the church service. I don't think I've seen maybe I've seen somebody from South Korea, maybe once. I don't know, but definitely not that many times. What a blessing. Welcome. Tell me, Celeste, what time is it in South Korea? I'm always interested. I'm thinking it must be like in the early morning. Put in the chat what time it is there, but welcome.
Jin from Georgia. We have Rosalie from Belize.
Wow. Beautiful country, island, or not an island.
From Jamaica.
There's an island. Beautiful Jamaica. Welcome.
Absolutely. David from Van Horn, Texas.
All right. We have our beautiful sister Gigi from Texas as well. Welcome.
Texas is in the house.
Yes.
Awesome.
No
New Yorkers?
Gracefully from Alberta, Canada. Doesn't look like you're New Yorkers. They're not.
What are you going to do?
I don't know. No New Yorkers. Rianne from Kansas.
We got Columbia. Oh, Reed, Columbia. I love it.
Welcome.
Somebody else we got, again, Omen from Georgia. So I don't see Cali and I don't see New York. Oh, boy.
Nope. Not in the house.
We got to go. Anguilla. Barbara, welcome.
Welcome. So good to see all of you. And we're just thrilled to see all the different places where you're viewing from. Thank you for tuning in. And if it's like late at night or early waking up, thank you for staying up. We just thank you from the bottom of our hearts for supporting me manage, but also Mental Health Mondays. And so please, I'm just feel that our topic is something that is on all. Maybe you're in a marriage, in a relationship, and you want to get some tips on how to improve that relationship. And even if the relationship is fine and you feel like you're maintaining, but it's always good to just to do a little tune up, just like a car. Every car, I don't know, in my car, the computer in the car says, okay, you've gone time to change the oil, or it's time to do this. Every thing needs a little bit of maintenance, and marriage and relationships are no different. And so we're going to be talking about that tonight. So again, please put in the chat because we want to answer your questions. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, Will Smith and Jada Pinkett, which have been known as the power couple in Hollywood, in the Hollywood circle. He's done so many movies. She's done some movies. Of course, he did his popular television program for years and years and years, a music artist or a rap artist as well. And so this couple is known around the world. And there's always been, I shouldn't say always, but I say in the last 10 years, maybe, last 10 years, always some rumors surrounding them. I had heard those rumors that they had an open marriage and all of these things. And I would say, no, they've never said that. But in so many ways, they kind of did let us know that's what was happening. And so we're not here to highlight their marriage as this is the type of marriage that you should be modeling your marriage after. But they, were open and honest. Really, she was open and honest this week about just the fact that they had challenges. And in her words, they decided to stay married, but to actually stay married, but to separate and to live separate lives. And in all reality, that's not what marriage is all about. Marriage is about living your lives together. Like I was telling Dr. Whyte off air, so many of us are probably like, wow, how could they do that? Like, that's not really a marriage. And it's true, it's not. But so many people are married on paper and they live in the same house, just like Jada and Will still live in the same home. But emotionally, they are not connected like a married couple. Like they are kind of like roommates, or they pass, like how they say ships passing in the night. Like they might pass each other in the hallway on the way to work or something, and they might express a few words here or there, but there's no real passion, and the passion is gone, and the connection is gone. And so that's what we want to talk about. That it's easy to judge what they did or what they're doing, but in reality, a lot of us do that as well. And that's what we don't want for your marriages. We want your marriages to be happy, healthy, vibrant marriages. And we know that that takes work. So Dr. Whyte, you have some words to share?
What I was going to share is it's interesting when you see people performing at really high levels. And sometimes you even say that you want fame, and you want but the investment that you have to make to perform at these really high levels, one of the things I've always been struck by is Will Smith to excellence. It is when he delivers, his performances, he does it with such he casts this illusion that it's all natural. When in fact he puts so much work in. I was especially struck by the movie Men in Black, where it's just the scene of him running. Supposedly he was coached by a track coach, I think it was at UCLA, for like 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And make it convincing. And I bring that up because when you're performing at that level, when you're achieving at that level, when you have that level of publicity on you, there's a stress that you can experience that I think we can, sit back and we can learn from it.
Right.
That we can, first and foremost, I think we do need to acknowledge some gratefulness for a commitment to be that excellent. Okay. First of all, let's acknowledge that. But then let's double back and say, well, what can we learn from it? What can we then say, okay, how do I perform at a high level and at the same time make sure that I keep my relationship as healthy as possible? Like that really, hopefully this conversation would foster, because on some level we are committed to going after career aspirations, fiscal soundness. We trying to get that back. You're after these things, but in the pursuit of it, just make sure you keep the main thing, or you are respectful of those ingredients necessary to maintain a robust relationship. So what are those what are some of those core things that are necessary in order to keep a relationship? And what would you say, sis?
Yeah, I was just thinking, and I know we've mentioned, we've done so many programs, but we've mentioned this before, talking about marriage and relationships. But I'm just thinking about some of the things that Dr. John Gottman prescribes for couples, you know, weekly date nights. Weekly date nights. I mean, that sounds so like, okay, but to actually make time to incorporate that into your week for your marriage is huge, because it's 2 hours. I mean, he says at least 2 hours, and some people are like, to carve out 2 hours, and it can look so many different ways. I know I've had couples where they had young children and they didn't have anyone living in the area, so somebody that they trusted could take care of their very young children. So they carved out their 2 hours was after little kids to bed, because they know they were going to put them to bed about 7 o'clock. And so they could have from 7 to 10 or 8 to 10 time on one night a week where they could, the husband could, both of them could make a nice dinner and make it look and went out to do things. And so you have to be creative. Some people I've had actually took hikes in the middle of both home. They could take time out at school. Sometimes you have to be creative with these things, but it's important to be intentional about your date nights, because it helps you to reconnect each and every week. So that's one tool. I can keep going, but you might want one yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, Gigi, we see your question. I'm gonna say my tool, and then we'll question. So, in a word, friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Friendship. In a word, friendship. I think I think because of the passionate nature of courting, you can mistake passion for friendship, and or even obsession, like especially early on in courtship, it can be so obsessive. We hear terms like love bombing and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And what can evade us is, do we have a good friendship? Do we have a good friendship?
Very
And
important.
then all the elements that come off of that. When it's a really good friend, you respect them. When it's a really good friend, you value their input. When it's a really good friend, you're emotionally invested in them.
Mm-hmm.
You regard them. You want to look nice for them. You want them to look nice for you.
Right.
Like all of those things. And I just times in couples, that friendship not being prioritized. And when that goes to the wayside, it's so easy to become combatants.
Mm-hmm.
And you might not be physical combatants, but you are like competing for resources
Mm-hmm.
rather than being a team, devoting resources to a common agenda.
Mm.
So I think that that's really the core thing, is with a friendship, you have a partnership, you have an allyship,
Mm-hmm.
and resources are devoted to the common goals of the relationship,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to when that disintegrates, everyone's trying to pull resources,
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes a fight.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think that connection time that you can make, not just like God, I like to just once a week for those 2 hours, like just solid block of time for to build on your friendship. As you were saying, I like the connection that's made builds on the friendship that you have as your foundation. But also having little connection times throughout the day. It could be a text of how much I appreciate you. It could be a phone call. You could just say it out of your mouth in person to your spouse. Just letting them know on a daily basis how much you love them, how much you appreciate them. Not that you're love bombing them, but it's just a simple little, this is how much I love you. Just a little drop. Could be a little note. I saw something I read something in a book. It was this old, I can't remember how old the couple was. I think they were like in their 80s, and I forget how many years they had been married. But every single day, they would write, like, they had this thing, they would take the first letter from this phrase that I'm about to say, this is how much I love you, which was TIH, and it continued, this is how much I love you. And they would write those letters, and they would put it, like, sometimes they'd write it with lipstick on the mirror. Or one day the husband unrolled the toilet paper so that the last sheet of toilet paper that she took had, this is how much I love you, the letter to that statement. And she found that it's like they would do, so it kept, they never knew where to expect it to be, but they would do that every day. I'm not saying we have to do that. That's cute. It's something creative that just keeps the spark going. Go ahead.
It's just that communication that person is top of mind.
Right.
Yeah. No, absolutely. This
Yes.
is dangerous, but like imagine treating your spouse like it's an affair,
Right.
Like imagine treating
But
them
I
that
know
way.
what you mean. I know what you're trying to say, because affairs are wrong. Affairs are wrong. I'm looking at the camera.
No question they're
Affairs are
wrong,
wrong.
but
However, you don't ignore the mistress, right? If you don't text or call the mistress,
it'd be a problem.
You trying to protect your whole situation because you're not trying to get your cover blown, which is wrong. However, but you do put a lot of attention into that. So
you don't make any excuses that you can't see them.
Right. No, you don't. You're like, oh, I'm busy, I'm at work. And they're like,
you
really?
find a way.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right, now let's go to Gigi.
Okay.
What would you say to people who are living together as man and wife but not having sex? So they believe it's okay with God as long as they are, I presume you're saying, not having sex. Isn't living as a man and a wife more than sexual?
Right.
So she's creating a scenario in which two people are living together, but they're not having sex, right? Well, it's interesting because Gigi, if what you were saying was true, it would be like illegal for a man to have a female roommate. And there are people who have there are, what's the word? There are
Platonic
there are platonic,
friends.
relationships. There are platonic relationships all the time where people have no interest in being intimate, and there's nothing wrong with it.
But it sounds like
Now,
this isn't a platonic situation.
but this is not a platonic situation. And I think what you're highlighting, Gigi, is when you've set certain boundaries for yourself, it's a good idea to not tempt yourself unnecessarily. And what I mean by that is,
Right.
what people are often not aware of is the fact that we have the frontal brain, we have the frontal lobes, and us being guided by the frontal lobes, right? The frontal lobes has all these principles, all these ideals. It's got these standards. It's just wonderful, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is supporting that frontal lobe is a limbic brain, okay, with more visceral urges. And what can happen is you're sort of like a different person, or the values that you prioritize with your frontal lobe, when the limbic brain is sort of taking over and you're now having to deal with those kind of urges, including sexual urges. Sometimes all and principles, they take now a back seat to more primitive urges. And it is when you understand that while I'm not going to be driven by my limbic brain, let me not put myself in situations where I'm vulnerable. Okay, let me be respectful of understanding that, yeah, you want to respect the fact that you do have a limbic urges that the frontal lobe can at times have a difficult time dampening, even though it can do it. And that's why you have to protect your frontal lobe. So that's why I wouldn't necessarily want to be living with a person that I had romantic inclinations for, that I made the commitment I wasn't going to have sex
right. She did come back and say, no, I mean, they're engaged and seriously dating. So with that, I completely agree with what you stated. And to put yourself in with those temptations, that, that person's in the house, and like you're tempting yourself, and you're playing with the devil, if you will. You're playing with the devil in the sense that I think he's not going to come and tempt you in a way that's going to get you to do what you are saying you don't want to do. I mean, you're fooling yourself, because it's such an easy target. You're such an easy target for him to be able to try to do that, because you've put yourself in a situation to make yourself vulnerable in that situation. But also because it sounds like maybe this is a Christian couple who are like, okay, I'm okay. We're not sleeping together. We're just living in the house together. If you're coming from that space, then you care about what the Bible says, and the Bible says to avoid the appearance of evil, right? So people looking at this are thinking like, okay, they live there together. They're probably the natural assumption that people would think. If you absolutely don't care about the Bible, well, then that point's not going to matter to you. But that's the only reason why I would think that you live with someone that you're dating, you're engaged to, and not have sex with them is because you are coming from a biblical perspective, or maybe you just don't want to have sex before marriage. So it's a big surprise. I have no idea. But either way, you're tempting yourself. For whatever your reasons are, you're definitely tempting yourself.
On to Clint's question. What do y'all suggest if your date nights are few and far between? We have no one willing to watch our kids laugh out loud. So, we faced a similar situation, Clint, and some of the things that we employed were things like her bedtime, like making sure that she was up as early as possible. Okay, okay, guys, not 1 a.m., but like 5 a.m., 6, like making sure she got up at a reasonable hour so that she would then be falling asleep by 6, 7 o'clock. So that now mom and I now had our time
Right.
together. Those were some of the tools that we used. um and then, yeah, sometimes it's just being creative, because obviously I don't even know how old your kids are, Clint, but I think it's absolutely critical that you give things that, it has, the marriage has to get its, priority.
You have.
But yeah, we would exploit the sleep cycle.
Yes, yeah, then that's what I was saying that some couples did, that I've had for clients. They had very little young children, so they were able to put them to bed by 7 o'clock, and they were able to make those, if they wanted to be to bed by 10, those 3 hours was, a date night for them. And they even would take those evening time hours on a regular day just to spend, some connection time. I know the question. Okay, here it is. The
Yeah.
next question kind of ties in with what I want to say. Why do wives and husbands allow the children to change their marital relationship? Um, Deborah, that's a good question. And I love to tell couples that, your relationship, your marital relationship should be priority above the children. And yes, they need to be above the children, because if the mommy and daddy are happy, or the parents are happy, if the marriage is healthy because you have paid attention to all the things to make it so that it is healthy, and mom and dad put the work into the relationship, then the children will be happy. They'll be healthy. They'll be mentally, emotionally healthy. So many times we enter into marriage, and we have the honeymoon time, and we have some years together, a few years together, and then children come in, and then we just focus all on the children, especially moms. We can just like focus on our children because we're just like, we're going to take the best care of them. And you do. But then we kind of sometimes forget about our husbands, and they feel neglected sometimes. And so the relationship can start to deteriorate from there. And so it's so important to be mindful to make sure that the marital relationship is taken care of, even takes, supreme over the children. That is so very important. Even again, and I feel like I'm picking on wives. I'm not picking on wives. I am a wife as well. But sometimes the way that we talk to, or like we'll be in a mother mood, like always talking to kids all day long. And then we don't know how to flip the switch or flip the switch down, whatever you want to say, and become a wife and be a wife to our husband and talk to them like this is our husband, this is an adult. We just kind of just go from talking to kids in our motherly tone and telling them what to do, and then we just go right into a conversation with our husband, and a lot of times we'll continue the same attitude and with our husbands. And how many of us have heard, you treat me like a child, like you're speaking to me like a child, talking to children all day. And sometimes it's hard for us women and moms to switch that flip, but we also want to be very intentional about that as well, to say, okay, I'm going to go in here and have grown-up talk with my husband and connection time.
I once heard this very naughty statistic that with the birth of each child, marriage satisfaction goes down by 25%.
You heard that? I haven't heard that, but wow.
I'm totally joking,
Oh,
and I can't remember the statistics, so please don't quote us. I just thought it was hysterical.
yeah.
But I agree with everything you said, that you have to really and truly remember to prioritize the relationship. So how long does one stay with a non-believing spouse before giving up? How long does one stay with a non-believing spouse before giving up? Go for it, sis. Well, I mean, well, first of all, so
I'm
you
gonna
want to
say
know,
don't give up.
like,
Don't give up. I mean, not on your marriage. I mean, my thoughts and answer to this question is, so don't give up on the spouse just because the spouse is a non-believer, right? That's not a deal breaker. You pray for the spouse. You want to be the example on, that hopefully God's love is shining through you to the spouse and to the children, that will, eventually win them over, and they want to have that relationship with God. But, we can't force someone to do that. And my honest opinion, if I'm coming from a biblical standpoint, like that's just not a deal breaker for a marriage. A non-believing spouse doesn't mean that you're emotionally abused. I mean, that's a different conversation. But if it's just on the premise that they're not a believer, that's not a deal breaker from a biblical standpoint. And even and then let's just take the Bible out, and let's just say this is not a Christian that I'm speaking to, or a Christian in that situation. If they're not a bad person and they're treating you well, and you have children, and they're not, again, not a mean person, and they're not abusing you, there's no reason to give up on that marriage.
Yeah, so just a few, statistics in terms of, just a few statistics in terms of marriage. So first of all, you want to know that people are getting married later and later. So average woman is getting married around, like, average male around 28. Roughly about 4% of couples are divorcing after 10 years. 63% of divorcees believe a better understanding of the commitments of marriage could have helped them avoid divorce. And lack of compatibility is a top reason for new couples divorce. So 50% of couples who divorced in their first year cited this cause. So getting clear on how compatible you are is a big deal. And this was a article, let's see, coming out of Forbes, actually. All right, so that would be a difficult question to answer from a statistical standpoint. So just a FYI. But I thought those were some helpful things that you mentioned. Okay. Any other questions? Who are the most important? Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, while we're looking for more questions for people to be asking. I just want to make a comment on like our opening couple that we talked about. You know, something that Jada said in the interviews about her book is that they just were exhausted. They had been trying to do what they could do to make the marriage better. I don't know what those things were. They're multimillionaires, so I'm sure they went to the best therapy and all of those type marriage therapy and that type of stuff, but they just became exhausted from trying, and so they just gave up. Again, we're not highlighting them as the example. Is Mental Health Monday is sponsored by Living Manna Church, and so we come from a biblical perspective, and I believe when you get to the point where you're too tired, the saying says, and hopefully you're trying to do this along with God, but if you're not and you get too tired, it's like it comes to a point where you need to let go and let God, meaning like let God work in, can carry you through situations. But this is not speaking of physical abuse or emotional abuse, or if you're in a situation where your life is, at harm or being threatened. But if this is just like, we just don't get along, I don't like how he puts the toothpaste on the sink. I mean, you're just having silly arguments and not connecting and just not having that emotional connection. God needs to come into your situation, into your space, and he can change things from upside down to right side up. Go ahead, Dr.
Well, and so lessons that you can derive are things like, please don't be afraid to invest in your relationship, especially early on.
Right.
There's what's called prevention, but sometimes there's preemption. There's like you're not going to go in that direction if you can harness certain tools. One of the primary reasons why people at times can divorce include communication issues, like just underestimating how powerful it is to be able to communicate your needs effectively. And the critical part of communicating is listening also. So how well do you listen and hear what your partner is actually saying?
Mm-hmm.
Both what's being verbalized and what's being communicated non-verbally. So in California, for example, you'll see lots of martial arts studios all over the place, and all over, you bump into people all the time. I train. And the reality is, most of us are going to get through a good bulk of our life, and maybe you have 1 fight, 2 fight, 3 the max, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every time you're talking, you are in a verbal fight, if you will. You are trying to convince a person of something, or sometimes you're selling something. And how much investment, how many communication gyms have you seen people attending? Like, how much effort are you seeing people put into a skill that they use every day? Especially if you're married, you are communicating on a daily basis, and too often we are not proficient in those skills of communication. So the point being, please do not be afraid to make the investment in getting you on those skills, on those tools that will be more effective in getting what you need out of the relationship, and also giving what you need out of the relationships. Let me see if I can get a good question for you, Sister Atonte. Let's see. Let's put Sister Atonte in the hot seat, if she doesn't mind.
But this one, or do you have another question?
No, go ahead. No, I was going to give you another question. I was going to give you a question.
Okay, well, I just want to answer. This says, so we have no this person is stating that we have no communication or intimacy before or anymore because of a faith of belief. Can you recommend a counseling person in Ontario? I'm assuming it's Ontario, Canada. So we can't, I can't, I don't know if Dr. Whyte can, but I can't recommend anyone because I don't know of a Christian therapist in Ontario, Canada.
Is Psychology Today international?
That's, I think.
Because because if
Don't let
psychology
me
today
don't
is
let me don't let me
international,
Google, but I think it is. I think it is. I think
because if it is,
that's what I was gonna
you might be
suggest.
able to.
Yes. So
You might
while you're
nowadays, no matter
talking, I'm
where
Googling.
you are, yeah, no matter where you are, whether it's Google or whether it's um, pastoral resources or whether it might be your primary care physician, there are definitely sources where you can get a
Right.
referral to a practitioner. Just pursue it like your life depends on it, because your life does depend on it. But yeah, I think it's a great question, because that is just something that you should take the time to pursue. And please don't wait till a crisis. Do not wait till a crisis. Get that team set up
Yeah.
pre-crisis so that when the crisis hits, you're ready. You're ready to hit the ground.
You know,
But I hope you really caught the point that we all could use some good counsel and some intention put into building this skill
right.
that we use
Right.
all the
I
time.
couldn't do a fast enough Google search, but to this person, please just see if psychology today is international. And like Dr. Whyte said, if it's not, you can Google your local area of a therapist near you. And I just want to say, I know you said you were specific about a Christian counselor, and that's that's all fine and well. And I mean, Christian counselors can come from a perspective if you ask them to, but I can just tell you that I have amazing therapists who don't lead with the fact that maybe they're not Christians, but the things, I mean, there's still the quality of therapy that they provide is amazing, and input give to your marriage. I even say that because some people say like, no, I want a Seventh-day Adventist therapist. I was like, you don't have to have a Seventh-day Adventist therapist to get help. There are many just regular Christian therapists out there, or even non-Christian therapists that can at least to your situation and help in your marriage, and to have a perspective, help you have a healthy perspective in the way that you speak, or can you listen to your partner. So I just want to put that out there because I feel like that's a
So
myth.
what one of the things is one of the things, you get places like Gottman Institute or whether it's Michelle Weiner Davis divorce, where they actually have workshops and weeks where you can actually have intensive
Right.
focus on issues. And so you might be in Canada, but you and have some devoted
True.
time with these experts actually kind of pouring into your that. So no matter where you potentially make that investment, and it's only marriage, right? It's only that relationship that can reduce your wealth in half. So it's a pretty important um, it's a pretty important issue.
Right.
But oh, and then some of them even have utilities, so that now you could avail yourself of the resources,
Right.
and they have things you can purchase and benefit
Right.
from their expertise.
Right. You know what? You're starting, you haven't popped in months, but you're popping
Am
just,
I popping?
well, you were, or you were just a little bit. I'm thinking maybe I can take this question and then you can like go out and come back in. I know that's what we used to do, but it's still a little poppy. So I don't know. And it just happened when you started answering this question. It wasn't the whole time at all.
I have no idea.
Okay. So you can go out and come back in and see if that helps the popping. Okay. Okay, Malachi 2:16, the Lord says he hates divorce. A lot of staying in relationships with marriage is values just similar to the news this week. Isn't this a lie? Good question, Studio 1080. Good statement and question. I'm going to tell you this. This is something my husband and I are studying right now about, because we get a lot of questions when we do our freestyle on Sabbath. For those of you who do worship with us on Sabbath, we get a lot of questions on marriage. We've had a ton, and on marriage and divorce. And so we want to give it its true quality time, and I want to do that as well. So I'm going to ask that you stay tuned to listen and get the update, so you know when we're going live and when we're going to talk about the marriage topic, specifically about divorce and like from a biblical perspective. And of your question.
Saying 1, 2, 3. Is it popping still, or is it?
It's
nice?
not popping. It's not popping.
Yeah, all right, go for it.
Or a lot of couples are staying in relationships because of this, and marriage is not real. Yes, I mean, like, look, we were all blindsided by Will and Jada. I mean, they were, because they the public persona was that they were still a couple and they were still married, and so that's why people were so taken, not portraying the truth of your relationship. But again, if you stay tuned to Living Man in Church, you will get some of the biblical answers about divorce in different situations. Because I will say this, it's not as cut and dry all the time as we think. So moving on, if we can take a next question.
What can you do when your spouse avoids communication? Well, the good news is it's almost impossible for a person to avoid communication when you understand that there's verbal communication and then there's nonverbal communication.
Right.
So the very act of not saying something, the person is communicating something to you.
Yeah.
And typically when people grow silent, it's because they feel as if their verbalizing things has been falling on deaf ears, and they now don't trust you with the verbalization.
Right.
Obviously, I don't know your scenario, so this totally might not speak to what you're saying. I'm just sharing with you some of the kind of principles, that at times can be in play. So when a person is not speaking, it's worth asking yourself, what have they said so much? It doesn't even need to be said again. What is it that they've been trying, they could possibly feel like I've been ignoring? And that then allows you to say, look, it feels as if I perhaps have not been hearing what you've been saying. Mm-hmm. In fact, when I kind of racked my brain, one of the things I remember you saying was X, Y, or Z. You mentioned that I don't listen to you. I blah, 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 and you just list out in your heart of hearts, what's this person been saying that I've been kind of bypassing? Mm-hmm. If they were speaking, what would they probably be saying? Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you start the discussion that way, it's helpful. The other times, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it warrants a response. So if a person's been appealing for apple pie, maybe, and I'm totally oversimplifying it right now, but maybe what would get them talking is if you produce some apple pie, lo and behold, mm-hmm. You're like, okay, well, looks like you're hearing me now, so maybe we can re-engage the dialogue. And of course, so I want you to see the myriad of reasons that can be causing these things so that you can see this is just so that you can understand the importance of getting a trained professional focused on your situation.
Right.
Sometimes what mutes a person is anger. So maybe they felt so violent. Sometimes they're feeling ignored. Sometimes they might be in shock. Sometimes they don't know what to say. I just want you to see the myriad of reasons why a person at times can stop verbalizing what they're communicating. Mm-hmm. And the result is nonverbal communication.
Yeah. They're not speaking, but that not speaking is still communicating. It's communicating something. And we call that meta communication. So it is they're still communicating. I don't know if it, like, again, like Dr. Whyte said, we don't know your exact situation, how long, that's been, happening, or how, that your spouse is not communicating with you and there's been silence, but truly, uh, this is a great time if, the spouse is willing, if you're both are willing to go and find a marriage and family therapist, or just a therapist that can help in your marriage, if they're willing to go. This is a great time, because maybe the spouse will feel safer in a space to talk about what's really going on in their heart with a third party there.
Okay.
It's possible.
Here's Gigi dropping bombs.
Yeah.
When trying to work through past infidelity, when memories of the past come back, even though there has been true repentance, how do you fight these thoughts in the moment? Okay, so now, Gigi, you're asking the question from the victim. So we're going to answer it from the victim's perspective. Experiencing infidelity is traumatizing.
Yes, it is.
And you want to realize that. So there's a condition called post-traumatic stress disorder. And in many ways, the infidelity can really leave you with those symptoms of obviously having trust issues. Those memories can then leave you with intrusive thoughts. So you're just in the middle of your day and then you're just flooded with intrusive thoughts. These are some of the things my patients have mentioned. Obviously, you can have moments of severe anger. And so one of the things you have to come to is what is going to be your system for healing?
Mm-hmm.
That anger that is stored inside your body, what will be your process to let it out constructively? Like, that is the question in front of you. You're not responsible for the trauma. You're responsible for the healing. You owe yourself that. What is the process you're going to invest in to catharsis, to promote the healing, to promote the growth? So an important question that you have to ask yourself is, do I have the ability to really and truly forgive this person and not subconsciously punish them?
Right.
Okay. Not succumb to belittling or being caustic, being hostile. What do I really have the ability to do that? And you can see why it would be so wise to get a trained professional to help you understand the layers of the trauma, how it's impacting you, and how it's poised to hijack you.
Yes.
Okay. Getting clear on those things, and then what you can do about it. So those are some of the steps that you can involve yourself in to make sure you grow from this rather than degenerating from this. Instead, you grow and you heal rather than just having to live with that.
Right.
What were you going to say, sis?
I was going to say, I agree with everything that you said. And yes, it's important that you grow, and so that the anger does not destroy you, especially if you've decided to stay with this person and to forgive them. I mean, when you're talking about intrusive thoughts, as far as like just the memory of the actual action, I mean, it's just like any other negative thought. I work with to deal with negative thoughts, right? And so even when that negative thought or that memory of that negative situation pops into your mind, and this is for a situation where you've decided to stay and you're forgiving them, so you don't want to replay it over and over, but the thoughts keep just popping in. So to externalize that thought and just say, okay, memory, thought, you're trying to get me to relive this experience. I have seen true repentance from my spouse and chosen to forgive him or her. And we are in a different space and we're moving forward. And then you imagine yourself destroying that thought, and you can, do that in so many ways. And so this thought, that's not going to be the end of the thought, meaning maybe for that moment it's the end, and it's going to come back. And when it comes back, you do it again and you do it again. And then eventually, as you're in a healthy space, and like Dr. Whyte said, you and your spouse are going to, you're in counseling, you and your spouse are in counseling. And so you're in a happier space. So if you're in a happier space, when you get these thoughts, it's easier for you to externalize that thought, have a conversation with that thought, and destroy that thought. If you're in a happier space, if the marriage is not going in the right direction, in a happier space, then it's going to be difficult to deal with those thoughts. And then you have to ask yourself, why am I in this marriage? What am I doing?
Yeah, no, well said. And I mean, for me with the thoughts, I like the detour. You ask yourself, what is this thought distracting me from right now?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that it's distracting me from? Because a lot of times it might come up while you're doing something relatively important. And so, okay, what do I need to get my focus back on? Because by so doing, you don't want to be victimized by these quote unquote intrusive thoughts. Loveless marriage affect your children? Can a lonely and loveless marriage affect your children?
Yes. And I just say yes, just like that. And Dr. Whyte, I'm sure you have something to share on this too. But a lonely and loveless, because they feel all of that. Even when we have anxiety and we're anxious, our children feel that. When we're not happy, and they can see by example each and every day that, they may not even know what to call it, but mom and dad don't show love to each other, or maybe the words are harsh that you speak in front of your children. And so they can feel that, and it makes them unhappy, because the home is not, it's not a vibrant, happy, loving home. And so they can feel that. They feel our emotions.
Yeah. So it would be so cool to like pull Amelie in and like unpack that. What's the additional stuff that you're wanting to say behind that question? While the marriage can be challenged, you as a partner, you do get to be loving, as a person, and show those kids your model of love. And then you said love marriage. That's quite a term, a loveless marriage. I think it should definitely sensitize us to the importance of investing in our relationship, with the relationship directly impacts our children for the better, or at times it can negatively impact them. So that's why we want to make sure that our relationships are filled with love and vibrance, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's a statement here, not quite a question. I would disagree. We are bound in covenant for reasons. I don't think always looking for ways out is the best answer.
Who said that they should be looking for a way out?
I don't think.
Maybe that was in the chat or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But anyway, I would disagree. We're bound in covenant for a reason. I don't think always looking. Okay, so yeah, definitely agree that we don't want to always be looking for a way out. I think that's a fair thing to say. I think that the balance to that is in cases of abuse, in cases of infidelity, in cases where a party feels like differences are reconcilable, differences are irreconcilable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Infinity doesn't need to be sexual either. I feel like anything that's dominating your time.
Yeah, I think it was a typo. It was infidelity.
Infidelity doesn't need to be sexual either. I feel like anything that's dominating your time and attention, which takes away from the marriage, is, in my opinion, infidelity. Now, that's a really that's a
Yeah,
really rich, statement,
that is.
because
Mhm.
once you do that, you start to realize, is it my hobbies that could be taking me away from, my spouse? Is it my relationship with others, whether romantic or non-romantic, that could be distracting me? Like, one of the things you got to realize on this planet is our resources are limited. Our
Mhm.
resources are limited. So is this really deserving of me taking resources away from my spouse potentially and putting it over here? Is this really appropriate?
Mhm.
That's a decent question to ask. So that's a really good point, Michelle. Um, let's see. I have a mother-in-law that's the wife. I don't know what you mean by that, Michelle.
I don't either. I don't know either.
Amber, stop setting us up with these questions. I think Amber's delirious at this point.
Oh. I want to say somebody said, they sent a greeting to us and said, Atonte and Dr. Whyte, me and my house are in need of your counseling services, please. We could only redirect you. Don't know where you live, but we have to redirect you to finding a family, a marriage and family therapist. So marriage and family therapist. I mean, they also, any therapist can help with not just marriage situations, but family situations impacting children. So again, that website we mentioned earlier, Psychology Today, you're able to put a filter in. Like if you are looking for a Christian therapist and you're specific, that's what you want, you can do that. You can find a therapist in your area. And so, yeah, that's the way that has to work, because we are in two different states and we can't just
Yeah.
provide care for people in other states. So, but somebody in your area can.
Okay. So Michelle just further clarified. And so we definitely want to try to respect your privacy on some level. So that's why we do want to kind of be sensitive with some of the comments that we feature, just because, it's like we kind of expose such that they're more universal rather than like getting really, really specific. But hopefully you guys are getting the point that these kinds of sensitive issues, they have a huge impact, and it's a very wise investment to say, you know what, I want to invest in getting a counselor that can help me in my situation. As you take a look at these principles, like the principle that relationship is going to impact the kids the same way that one that is void of love, it's also going to impact the kids, and it's going to impact the two people involved as well.
Right.
We both, I'm sure we've had arguments with our spouses, Amber included, and it's not a pleasant day. Like when you're not connected, it's draining. It's very, very draining. So that making the investment to try to minimize how much that happens and getting the tools that you can repair effectively and quick, it's really, really worth it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me see. Here we go. This one.
This will be our last one because
Okay.
we started a little bit late, but so this
It's
will be
about leave and cleave. Very important. A lot of parents interfere with marriages. Studio. What I would say is one of the concepts that you come across is this concept of vaults. Okay, vaults. And if you look up the definition of a vault, it will say a vault is a space within which valuables are kept. A vault is a space within which valuables are kept. And the more valuable something is, the more careful the boundaries that are going to be around that thing. And so what's boundaries is it's not completely walled off. There's a door. You can access it. But a lot of care is put into what can come in and what cannot come in. So when you're forming something as important as a relationship, what you allow to come into that relationship. Okay, this is the leaving and the cleaving part, and what you do not allow to come into that relationship is very important.
Right.
How you design your home, how much peace is occurring in your home. It depends on the boundaries that you set, you know, and so it's really a discussion about boundary setting. What do you allow in? What do you allow out?
Right.
Consequences for boundary violations, and so on and so forth. What would you say about that?
No, I totally agree with everything that you just shared. The boundaries is huge. Sometimes that's difficult for some because they just grew up in a home where there were no boundaries. So, but then when they go into their own home, they take that over. I can say that, you know, my husband and I were richly blessed. We didn't have in-laws. We had in-laws, both of us, who respected boundaries from out the gate. You know what I mean? Like we didn't have to necessarily put down boundaries because they just respected our marital space. And then if we, you know, called out to them from time to time and say, hey, you know, could get some advice on this, you know, they were glad to share. But I know so many times that's not everybody's story and situation. And so you have to be intentional in setting those boundaries and just from the very beginning of the marriage and just making it very clear that love both sets of our parents, but this is our marriage, and no one, like they say, don't let anyone or come in between. I think that's parents as well. Don't let any parent come in between you or. So if you want to reach out and ask them for some advice, that's fine, but it should not just come without you asking. And it, you know, it definitely should just, the boundaries need to be set. They need to be set.
Right. And yeah, you get to Michelle, you get to craft what the consequences should be. Naturally, they should be guided by the rule of law. That should help. Yeah, you get, and it's interesting, but because police are literally prepared to help you enforce your boundaries. We literally live in a system of law and order that's designed to support our boundaries. But that's how important boundaries are. But the key for you to design, what are the boundaries, and then what are the consequences that I will, you know, put in place given the value of what's inside the vault. And in this situation, we're talking about that marriage vault. Like the health of a society is based on the value of the marital vault. Like the happiness of the children, the happiness of the spouses depends on the value of what's in that vault. So how important is it for you to bound it appropriately?
Yes. And the person I had asked or answered the question a little while ago, they said that needed the therapy or the counseling from both of us, and we were leading them to Psychology Today. Said they were in New Zealand, and so yes, but you know they're therapists and counselors in New Zealand as well. So you may not be able to do the Psychology Today because you're out of the country, but there's something that is similar to that. I'm sure in your country and in your local area, you can find a therapist that can help you and work with you in your situation. So
that person in New Zealand, think about, you might want to go there. They might be at GottmanInstitute.com. Look up John Gottman.
Yes.
And my goodness, there's just such a plethora of resources that they have. If you go to the Beck Institute, yet again, just a huge number of resources. And again, Michelle Weiner Davis with divorce. Look up divorcebusting.com. And Michelle's claim to fame is she specializes in couples where one partner has one foot out the door. Like that's her specialty. So and again, it's divorce busting. So
Right.
These are places where you can get resources that can help you as well.
Yes, we are all out of time, and we see that this marriage relationship conversation is very important to so many of you. And I think we may come back possibly and revisit this. We will see, because there's comments here, and we are actually not going to be here next week, but when we come back, we can follow up.
I'll mention one resource. It's my resource. So it's my7vitals.com, my7vitals.com. And one of the things that we do is relationships. So my7vitals.com and or killingburnout.com.
Yes.
So those are some resources that I offer, and there's even some free resources on there. So
yes,
there you have it.
Great stuff. That will be helpful. And please do come back and talk about this more. So, well, we thank you, all of you, for viewing. We had quite the worldwide audience tonight, from New Zealand to South Korea to here in North America. So we're thankful for all of you, and just want to have you have a good night, and for you to come back and see us in 2 weeks. We will be here with another Mental Health Monday. It looks like we'll be talking about this topic again. So we look forward to that. Have a good evening.
Take care, sis.
All right.
Next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to the Huberman Lab podcast, where we discuss science and science-based tools for every life. I'm in biology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. Today, my guest is Dr. Layne Norton. Dr. Norton is one of the foremost experts in protein metabolism, fat loss, and nutrition. He did his degrees in biochemistry and nutritional sciences and is considered one of the world experts in understanding how we extract energy from our food and how exercise and what we eat combine to impact things like body composition and overall health. Today, we discussed an enormous number of topics under the umbrella of nutrition and fitness, including, for instance, what is energy balance? That is, how do we actually extract energy from our food? We also discussed the somewhat artificial sweeteners, whether or not they are safe or not, and whether or not they are an effective tool for weight loss, in particular for people suffering from obesity and different types of diabetes. We also talk about gut health, that is the gut microbiome, and how it's impacted by food and how it can actually impact the metabolism of the foods that we eat. We also discuss fasting, or so-called intermittent fasting or time-restricted feeding, what it does and what it does not do in terms of how effective it is for weight loss and perhaps even for health and longevity. We also talk about protein and define very clearly how much protein each and all of us need depending on our daily activities and life demands. We discuss the various types of diets that you've probably heard about, including ketogenic diets, vegan diets, vegetarian diets, and pure carnivore diets, as well as more typical omnivore diets, and how to make sure that you get all of the essential amino acids for healthy weight maintenance, weight loss, or directed muscle gain. We also talk about supplements, in particular, the supplements for which there is an immense amount of science pointing to their efficacy for fitness and for overall body composition. What I'm sure will become clear to you as you hear Layne talk about each and every one of these topics is that he has an incredible ability to both understand the mechanistic science, but also the real world applications of the various discoveries that are made in particular papers, and in particular in the randomized controlled trials. That is, when a given scientific hypothesis has been raised, he's extremely good at understanding why it was raised, but also at evaluating whether or not it works in the real world, which is what I believe most everybody out there is concerned with. I think this is one of the things that really distinguishes other voices in the nutritional landscape. I assure you that by the end of today's discussion, you will have a much clearer understanding about what the science says about nutrition, about fitness, and about how different diets and fitness programs combine to achieve the results that you want. Before we begin, I'd like to emphasize that this podcast is separate from my teaching and research roles at Stanford. It is, however, part of my desire and effort to bring zero cost to consumers and science-related tools to the general public. In keeping with that theme, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's podcast. Our first sponsor is Element. Element is an electrolyte drink with everything you need and nothing that you don't. That means it contains sodium, potassium, and magnesium, but no sugar. As you may have heard me discuss before on this podcast, every cell in our body, and in particular cells within our brain, the so-called neurons or nerve cells, critically rely on the presence of electrolytes, sodium, magnesium, and potassium in order to function properly. I myself am a big believer in consuming electrolytes anytime I've been sweating a lot. So that could be after or during exercise or after doing the sauna. So by drinking electrolytes in the form of Element electrolyte mix, I'm able to replenish those electrolytes and maintain mental clarity and energy throughout the day. Element contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. If you'd like to try Element, you can go to Drink Element, spelled lmnt.com/Huberman, to get a free sample pack with your purchase. Again, that's drinklmnt.com/Huberman to get the free sample pack. Today's episode is also brought to us by Roka. Roka makes eyeglasses and sunglasses that are of the absolute highest quality. The company was founded by two all-American swimmers, and everything about Roka eyeglasses and sunglasses were designed with performance in mind. I've spent a lifetime working on the biology of the visual system, and I can tell you that your visual system has to contend with an enormous number of challenges in order for you to see clearly. For instance, when you move from a sunny area to a shady area and back again, whether or not you're looking at something up close or off into the distance. Roka understands the biology of the visual system. Eyeglasses and sunglasses accordingly so that you always see with perfect clarity. Roka eyeglasses and sunglasses were initially designed for activities such as running and cycling, and indeed they are very lightweight. Most of the time I can't even remember that they're on my face, they're so lightweight. But the important thing to know about Roka eyeglasses and sunglasses is that while they can be used during sports activities, they also have a terrific aesthetic, and they can be used just as well for wearing to work or to dinner, etc. Roka eyeglasses and sunglasses, you can go to Roka, that's ROKA.com, and enter the code Huberman to save 20% off on your first order. Again, that's Roka, ROKA.com, and enter the code Huberman at checkout. Today's episode is also brought to us by Inside Tracker. Analyze the nutrition program that analyzes data from your blood and DNA to help you better understand your body and help you reach your health goals. Now, I've long been a believer in getting regular blood work done for the simple reason that many of the factors that impact your immediate and long-term health can only be analyzed with a quality blood test. One of the major issues with a lot of blood and DNA tests out there, however, is that you get information back about levels of hormones, levels of lipids, metabolic factors, but you don't know about that information. With Inside Tracker, they have an easy-to-use platform that allows you to assess those levels and then sorts of behavioral changes, nutritional changes, maybe even supplementation changes you might want to make in order to bring those numbers into the ranges that are optimal for you. If you'd like to try Inside Tracker, you can go to insidetracker.com/Huberman to get 20% off any of Inside Tracker's plans. Again, that's insidetracker.com/Huberman to get 20% off. The Huberman Lab podcast is now partnered with Momentous Supplements. To find the supplements we discuss on the Huberman Lab podcast, you can go to Live Momentous, spelled O-U-S, livemomentous.com/Huberman. And I should just mention that the library of those supplements is constant. Again, that's livemomentous.com/Huberman. And now for my discussion with Dr. Layne Norton. Layne, Dr. Norton, thank you so much for being here. This is a long time coming, and I have to say I'm really excited because I've seen you in the social media sphere. I've also listened to a number of your other podcasts, and as a fellow PhD scientist, I feel a great kinship with you. I know you have tremendous experience in fitness and nutrition, a number of areas. We also got a lot of questions from our audience, and I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
I'm excited too. I mean, this, like you said, it's been something we've been talking about for a long time. So I was glad we were able to make it happen.
Yeah, indeed. And I think some of the audience has a debate or a battle. And I can tell you right now, it's not going to happen. Actually, one of the things that brought Layne and I together in conversation online and then via text, et cetera, was the fact that I love to be corrected. I did a post about artificial sweeteners, which we will talk about a little bit later in the episode. And Layne pointed out some areas of the study that I had missed or maybe even misunderstood. and I revised my opinions, and I think it's wonderful. And other studies have come out since then. So hopefully our conversation will serve as a message of how science and actionable science can be perceived, and it doesn't always have to be a battle. But hey, if we get into it, we get into it. It won't get physical because we know you would win. So in any case, I'd like to start with something that's rather basic and yet can be pretty complex. And that's this issue of energy balance and energy utilization. I think most people have heard of a calorie.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that most people don't actually know what that is in terms of how it works, what it represents. And so maybe you could just explain for people what happens when we eat food of any kind, and how is that actually converted into energy as a way of framing up the discussion around weight loss, weight maintenance, weight gain, and body composition.
It's a great question. And like you said, this is one of those things where, people use the term calories in, calories out. And they say, well, that's way too simplistic. And I'm like, if you look at what actually makes up calories in, calories out, it's actually good, right? So let's deal with the what you mentioned first. What is a calorie? Because I think a lot of people don't quite understand this. So a calorie just refers to a